Sorry, Mr. Roll
Barnwell. Here. Mrs. O'Hara. Here. Mr. Oshia.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Present.
Mr. Denton.
Here. Next item is the open forum pursuant to Public Law 42-46-6D, and I just remind everybody when they come up to please state their name and their address, and that there is a 15-minute time limit total. So please be respectful of others that would like to speak after you. First item on the list is Michael Davis.
Hello, I'm Michael Davis, 151 Douglas Pike. Tonight I wanted to talk about the changes to our tax rate structure that were proposed. I see this year, fiscal year 2020, we're going to lose $11.75 million in tangible tax dollars in taxable property. And the town administrator is proposing a 5.2% tax cut on top of that loss. It's proposed that we have a near 4% tax levy this year. With that said, why are we giving a tax cut to the tangible rate at the full expense of our residential rate? If this weren't a revaluation year, the tax rate would be jumping by $1.60. That's 9.26%. The current budget calls for commercial and residential rates to drop equally, even though residential rates appreciated by twice as much as commercial, 15.3% versus 8.7%. I wanted to ask the council if they're aware that we're giving a true deduction to the tangible rate when we're so tight on funds this year. There's no new revenue to supplement this drop in the tax rate. Given these tight finances, why were no modifications requested until to modify the tax ratio caps that we have in state law requested before tonight's agenda? This would allow massive flexibility in the tax rates that we can set next week. In the June 7th newsletter, there was a quote that said, "A forecasted reduction in state aid to education and the continuing impact of the National Grid tangible rate debacle by themselves are difficult to overcome." So I'm asking, if these are so difficult to overcome, why are we also providing a tax cut this year? This tax cut of 5.2% versus raising it to match the levy amount is a difference of $325,000 to the budget, even with the loss of the National Grid property. That's huge. And I went back today on the state websites and looked up our residential rates versus our tangible rates. And in FY 18 and 19, we had matching rate increases that matched the residential rate with the tangible rate. So this year, when we're going up 9.26% on the residential side, why are we going down 5.2% on the tangible rate? A question I have for the town administrator, and I hope you guys would ask as well, is why does he believe that a tangible tax rate cut is good for this year? Why is it a good thing for our town? Beyond any personal belief, what economic study or research has been presented to the council that would show that dropping the tangible rate will grow our economy in the town? What evidence is there that keeping the rate high at its current level or raising it will reduce our economy or force businesses to leave? I strongly believe that without any proof or studies, we shouldn't be dropping the rate. This is the equivalent of throwing something at the wall and hoping it sticks without any real research. My hope is that the council makes decisions based off of data. That's, from my experience, that's how the best companies in the private sector succeed. Where I work, prices are only raised or lowered when our accounting and finance departments can say this will grow the bottom line. I believe that the town needs to have a study completed that will show dropping rates, raising rates, and the effects of doing so. Until then, I strongly urge you to pass the resolution tonight to change the Rhode Island General Law 45-5-20.20 that would allow us to change the tangible rate ratio compared to the commercial rate beyond the current 225%, as it will allow us flexibility in setting tax rates until we have these studies complete that can prove why we need to drop such rates. Asking our residents to provide $1.7 million this year in extra revenue compared to last year is hard to accept, knowing that $325,000 of this increase is due to the tax cut in the tangible rate. Thank you.
Mike Rapko?
Mike Rapko, 25 Old Greenville Road. Just to follow up on the taxes, if you look at the three categories where you can change the tax levy, residential, commercial, and tangible, residential makes up 64% of those three categories, which is pretty hefty. Based upon the change in assessment value for residential compared to last year, residential is paying an extra $1.7 million toward the tax bill. Yet the budget's only going up $900,000 to $1 million. So there's an extra residential throwing in an extra $600,000 or $700,000. Doesn't make any sense. And when you look at it, if you do change the tangible and commercial rate, that's where the issue is, because that's where the $600,000 is, by cutting tangible and commercial. If that $600,000 was given back to the residential, then the contribution of residential would be $1.1 million, which is what your tax bill is going up for your budget is going up for the year. So it would be in line. So if you leave the tangible and commercial alone, now there's an equity for residential. And based upon that, when people come up or departments come up asking for more money, for example, the school committee asked for an extra $150,000. Last year they did the same thing. They asked for another $100,000 last year. That $150,000 extra money that you're going to spend or want to give to the school committee, that adds another 8 cents to the residential tax rate. Every $19,000 that gets added for extra spending adds a penny to the residential tax rate. So you're already burdening the residents with a high assessment that they're paying $1.7 million unless you adjust the $600,000 for tangibles in commercial, and now you're going to add another 8 cents by giving the school department additional funds. I think the council should be asking the school department, you have a multitude of accounts. Is there anything in those accounts that you might have over budgeted or left extra money? They have hundreds of accounts. They can't find 0.5% in their budget. That's $150,000. They can't find 0.5% of savings in their budget to make up the $150,000. That'd be the question I would ask. Can they find it? And a comment on the motor vehicle. It's unfortunate, even though they're estimates, we have a cap on revenue based upon 2016. The cap is $4.12 million. You cannot receive more than $4.12 million in motor vehicle from the levy and the state. But when you look at the budget, even though it's an estimate, when you add up all the pieces and add that to the motor vehicle tax levy, it comes up to $4.36 million. So based upon what you're seeing in the budget, we're overstating the revenue from these motor vehicles by $238,000. Even though it's estimates, that number should be brought down to the cap. Even the number should not go above the cap. You can't exceed the cap from the levy, which you have no control over. It's $35 per 1,000. That's a set number. The number that's going to change is going to be the state. So the number that should be in the total in this budget should be $4.123 million. You can't exceed the number. So I think you've got a problem on the revenue side that is overstated by $238,000, even though it's an estimate. Thank you very much.
Jennifer Campbell?
Hi, Jennifer Campbell, 24 Homestead Avenue, Smithfield. I was here in May for a proposed block party in the Homestead Avenue area. It was requested that I brought back the police and fire letters of that they allowed it, and then also a map for each of you. I did email it as well. It came from Don Fontaine because I couldn't figure out how to find your emails. But I have these if you'd like them. Hope said it was fine.
Okay.
The picture would go through. That is all. So I'm just looking to see if it's okay or if it's not okay, because we're waiting on a vote at that time for that.
Well, we have answers from the police and fire, so the administration will follow up with it now.
Perfect. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Hi, Clifford. I'm in spot the mic and there's someone else on the list, just as an FYI.
Yeah, you should divide the number of speakers by the number of...
Mike, I'm not a babysitter. I said it right from the start. It was 15 minutes to be respectful of others.
Yeah.
That's how I stated.
Okay, I think Mr. Davis and Mr. Ratko did a fine job of illustrating and explaining how this is going to impact the residential folks. But I think a more simplistic way to explain it to you is by lowering those tax rates on the tangible and the commercial rates, you're shifting over $600,000 of tax responsibility onto the backs of the taxpayers in this town, the residential homeowners. Okay. If you didn't make those reductions in those two categories, you could reduce the residential rate further than you're already projecting to reduce it to. So I think that needs to be considered. And although you might not have heard a lot of complaints about it now, I'd like to just remind you that people in this town don't have a habit of speaking up before the action, but they do let their unhappiness be known in the next election. We've had 6 fifth quarter tax bills, whole council voted out. We've had I think the impact of some things that happened last year caused change in this year's elections that might not have happened if we hadn't taken those missteps. So I think you need to be aware that even though you may not be hearing from 10,000 people, when they open their envelopes and see what the tax bill is that they're getting and see the types of increases they're getting, you're going to hear from them in a different way when the time comes. People don't pay attention to this stuff right now. Everybody's still assuming, oh, my tax bill is going to come out the same because they're changing the rates. That's what you say when you send out the letter on the assessment. So I think it's very important that you consider that. You're shifting $600,000. Mike Davis alluded to a study to figure out how to do this. I don't think you just randomly pick two numbers and throw a dot at the wall and make the adjustments based on that. You need to do a long-term, in-depth study. I mentioned the other night that the school aid was being reduced due to the decline in enrollment. I was corrected by a teacher in the audience from out of town. She was incorrect. I verified that through an email to the Department of Ed, and the first sentence in that reply is, yes, a decline in enrollment will translate to a loss of aid. You're projected to have a decline in enrollment for the next 10 years. Before you play around with these rates, you need to look at the impact of all the streams of revenue that you're going to be aiming for. You need to know how much money is going to continue to be shifted towards the homeowner and put on the backs of the homeowners because of the other changes in the revenues that are taking place. And we're not projecting that out. The veterans have come in here for the last 10 years asking for an exemption to be increased. You're limiting yourself. If you make a change in the commercial and the tangible rates now, you're going to limit yourself as to what you can do for other groups that have already been speaking up for about a decade. So I think the thing to do is just maintain the commercial rate and the tangible rates at what they are now. It was mentioned the other night by the administrator that, National Grid is our biggest taxpayer. Yeah, they are. For tangibles, they are. And they're here for a strategic reason. I don't think they just threw a dot at the wall and said, oh, no, Smithfield, let's go there. They need the substation to be a certain point. It's close to Massachusetts. It probably works into their whole network. They're not going to take the $60 to $100 million investment that they just made in infrastructure and pull it out of the ground and move it to another town. And they're the biggest beneficiary of the tangible tax rate reduction. Let's make no mistakes about it. The commercial property owners, again, I said the other night, I think there's 20 other communities that have a higher commercial rate than we do. And you have to look at where we're getting our commercial business from. Darling Village was filled with many businesses that shut their doors in Woonsocket and moved to North Smithfield. Woonsocket's rate is higher than our tangible rate and higher than our commercial rate. So what are they going to do? Go back to Woonsocket? They're here because this is where the market is. And the limited amount of commercial property that we have actually is a benefit to the commercial property owners currently, because it solidifies the value of their property, supply and demand. There's no other areas where they can build something with sewer and water. It's very limited. So if you've got an existing property that's commercial property, you're going to do okay, hopefully, on the resale, because there aren't any other areas where somebody can put a commercial property other than where yours is currently located. Unless there's a big expansion in the commercial areas, and I don't see that happening. With regard to the budget itself, I would urge you to request that you be provided with updated expenditures year-to-date as of June 1st for next Monday's meeting. If you take the time to make that request, and it's given to you, and it's a simple maneuver, it's not hard. We used to get them weekly from the finance director when I was on the budget committee. New numbers, literally in a week, she'd give us new numbers. I mean, from week to week, if we'd say. So you need to see those, because as you're looking at those, some of those numbers don't seem to be expending what you budgeted last year, yet you're increasing the budgeted amount for next year. You might not need to do that. And the way you're going to be able to tell is if you see current year-to-date expenditures. So I am, the enabling legislation that's on the table, I think that's only going to work for the future. For this year, unless you're willing to increase the tangible rate, which it doesn't sound to me like people are jumping up and down to do, it's not going to do you that much good as far as reducing the burden on the residential person. It actually might increase the burden on the residential homeowner. So I would urge you to do that for next year, but I think it is too late. I think somebody alluded to the fact that it should have happened earlier if you wanted to, if you were aware of what the circumstances were. I'll shut up now, so I'll make you happy. Thank you.
Scott Carrier. Next item,